start to identify how these proteins cycle.
And estimated that by the middle of the century,
actually makes your stress hormones go down faster.
Welcome to Brainwaves, a podcast about big ideas, produced at the University of Colorado Boulder. I'm Paul Bake. If you haven't already and you like what you hear, please like, subscribe, and share this show. We normally focus on one topic every week, but this week we had an opportunity, the Conference on World Affairs. If you don't know, it's a week-long smorgasbord of ideas. It has more than 200 panels and events, hundreds of speakers from around the world, covering everything from how women are changing the world to developing theories on black holes. Executive producer Andrew Sorensen talked to a few of those people. Seth Shostak is a senior astronomer for the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, or SETI. He's the author of the popular book Confessions of an Alien Hunter, and he hosts the Big Picture Science podcast.
Seth Shostak, thank you for being here. Welcome to Brainwaves. I hear you've got a bet over a cup of coffee that we're going to find intelligent life somewhere out there in the universe by 2035. You think you're going to win?
Well, I certainly hope so. I hope I'm around to see that win, actually. But yes, I bet anybody a cup of Starbucks or the equivalent that will find ET by 2035 say yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what SETI is and what you're doing, out there in the universe trying to find extraterrestrial intelligence?
Yeah, well, SETI, of course, is just an acronym. It's almost my name, but that's an accident. Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence is what the acronym stands for, and it's just those experiments that are designed to find evidence that there's somebody out there at least as clever as, Homo sapiens or the residents of Colorado, right? So that's what we're trying to do. And mostly what we do is we try and eavesdrop on radio signals that they might be broadcasting.
Have you found anything?
If we'd found something, you would know it.
The fact that we haven't found much, does that make you discouraged about the fact that there might be life out there? Is life rare in the universe?
Well, we don't know. We've never found any life beyond Earth that's, compelling evidence for life beyond Earth of any kind. I mean, not just, little gray guys with big eyeballs and big brains. We haven't found any evidence for, bacteria, viruses, anything else, right? So as far as we know, the only place in the universe that is known to have biology, it's Earth. But I think it's very unlikely that this is the only place with life, because the universe has so many it offers so many opportunities for developing life, because there are 1 trillion planets in our galaxy. There are 2 trillion other galaxies we can see, each with 1 trillion planets. I mean, there are just a lot of planets, and they can't all be bad. It's hard to believe they're all sterile. The fact that we haven't found it, I think, is because we simply haven't looked enough, or with the right, technique. I mean, there are at least 7 other places in our own solar system, right? Mars, everybody knows about Mars. It's everybody's favorite inhabited planet. I mean, there might be microbes under the surface of Mars today. There could be, doing their thing right now as we're sitting here. But there are also 3 moons of Jupiter. There are 2 moons of Saturn, which have have liquids of one sort or another, mostly water, but not entirely. And maybe there's some microbes living in those worlds too.
You've been doing this how long?
Well, I've been with the SETI Institute since 1990 or 91, somewhere in there.
Does it discourage you that you haven't found life yet?
Well, no, it doesn't discourage me, because, essentially every couple of months there's a new discovery which, tells you something about how maybe you could do the experiment better. And there certainly is always a march of technology. We're in this Silicon Valley, and marching technology, I mean, it's, it keeps you awake at night. And so the equipment that you're using to do the search is always getting better.
So you mentioned we're looking for radio signals, basically. What else are we doing, and what's next? What are some of the biggest, maybe even strangest ideas out there in the search for life?
Well, I mean, there certainly is increased effort to do what's called optical SETI. In other words, not just look for radio waves, but look for flashing laser lights, because, that's another way you could get in touch. If you're the Klingons and you want to, get in touch with the Earthlings for some reason, maybe you don't like the way you've been portrayed on television, I don't know. But whatever, you could send some laser flashes toward us. And maybe somebody's been doing that for a long time, because almost anybody with a big enough telescope could find out that there's life on Earth by seeing the oxygen in our atmosphere. That's something that's been in the atmosphere for 2 billion years. 2 billion years. So this, this giveaway that chlorophyll exists on Earth has been going into space for 2 billion years. And maybe somebody's noticed, and so they, every 2 weeks, maybe it's a high school science fair project, they flash a laser beam in our direction just to see if they can wake anybody up.
If someone at home is interested in all this, what can they be doing to either just learn more or, help out in the search for intelligent life?
What I recommend that they do is just go to the SETI Institute's website. That's just SETI.org, SETI.org. And they can find a lot of stuff there. And, of course, they can always send me an email. My email address is pretty easy to find. I get a lot of email, and some of it is even comprehensible. So, but if you have a question or, you just want to know more, write me. Or just go to the website. There are also, by the way, endless books and, of course, television programs and things like that. You go to the library and you'll find a lot on this subject.
All right. Seth Shostak from SETI, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Michael Gerson is a well-known columnist for the Washington Post. He normally talks about politics, but lately he's branched out into talking about his own struggles with mental illness.
Here with Michael Gerson at the Conference on World Affairs. Michael, you've talked a lot about 2020, what's coming up, and kind of politics in general. Where are we right now in this moment? The Mueller report just came out. There are so many moving pieces. What are you paying attention to coming into 2020?
Well, I think the president has pretty successfully pursued a base strategy over the last several months in kind of shoring up Republican support. And he needed it for a couple of reasons. He needed it to forestall the investigations, make sure Republicans, held the line, and also to avoid a nomination battle in the Republican Party. And I think he's succeeded in doing both of those things. The Mueller report, we have the best version from the president's perspective right now. That's going to change in the next week or two when we get the 400-page document, depending on how much is redacted. And that's going to be less good for the president. I don't think it's going to cause a Republican challenger, but I think it's going to change the narrative a little bit. He's not completely vindicated. And in fact, this is a circumstance where obstruction of justice, the determination was that, that you can make a case for it, even though a case can be made both ways. On the Democratic side, they've got a very fundamental choice to make. All of the intellectual energy in the party is very much on the left right now. And a lot of the policies that are being pursued are important, reparations or abolishing ICE or Medicare for all or the Green New Deal. You could make the case that from a policy perspective they're important, but they're pretty uniformly unpopular. Democratic Party is going to determine how far to the left it needs to go, like the candidate needs to go to win the primary, and then will that be a favorable lineup with Trump. My fear in all of this is we no longer have a center-right party at the national level in America. We now have a populist kind of nativist party. And I think if the Democrats play this wrong, we will no longer have a center-left party in America. If we get in an election like Bernie Sanders versus Donald Trump, that's a very bad choice for most people. It's not where they are.
We're in this unique moment, though. I want to get your thoughts on, does scandal matter anymore? As this Mueller report comes out, we've seen things that would have sunk dozens of other politicians just get kind of brushed over in this historical moment. Are we in a point where things are just going to blow over, in a month and we just kind of move on?
Well, what you're describing is the favorable effect of negative polarization on the president's support. So most people in American politics, in the 90%, I think, have chosen their team already when it comes to the 2020 election. I'm on one team, I'm on the other team, and, Trump is the team representative for one side and whoever the Democrat is for the other side. That is not a decision about the details of scandals, about the details of policy, about even rationality. It really is just choosing what tribe do you belong to. And a lot of people are just making their choice that way. So on the Republican tribe, I think they've accepted Trump in a way that I thought was going to be harder for him to achieve, but mainly because he's seen as the representative of their viewpoint in public. So it's a very small margin of people that might actually be influenced by evidence that relates to scandal or evidence that relates to policy. It's a big fight over them. They're important. But I think the president is benefiting massively by the process of polarization.
And then I want to switch gears, pretty hard shift here, but you've talked a lot about psychological depression, and you delivered a speech, I believe, at the National Cathedral about that got quite a bit of press. Where are we kind of as a country with depression, and why do you feel it's important for you to talk about this personally?
Well, it was important for me because I was giving a sermon at the Washington National Cathedral, and I had been hospitalized for depression the previous week. I had just gotten out. And it seemed like a topic I couldn't avoid if I was going to speak about anything internal and meaningful to myself. And tried to explain, there's still a lot of stigma around this kind of disease, but it is a disease, and you can't get better by thinking yourself out of it any more than you could think yourself out of tuberculosis. This is a condition related to chemicals in your brain that the mind takes and interprets as everyone hates me or I don't have any value. And these depressive periods, can be very dangerous when people are isolated. And so I had just gone through this process of working in small groups, like with other people who shared this disease, and then wanted to make a broader point that this is, it's something that where there shouldn't be stigma. About 10% of people in the United States will suffer at one time or another from serious depressive disorder. They're school teachers and they're politicians and they're people in the media. And there really is hope if you get help.
Okay, anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's great.
Well, then, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you.
Our next guest has stared down some of the deadliest weapons in the world and lived to tell the tale. Matthew Meselson was just awarded the Future of Life Award, celebrating people who have taken courageous acts to benefit humanity. He won that award in recognition of his role in banning biological weapons across the globe.
Let's take a trip kind of back in history here. As far as biological weapons go, I don't know if they were ever necessarily commonplace, but you were just saying that the United States government was pretty heavily invested in these things. What did it take to ban biological weapons?
Well, the big step was President Nixon's total renunciation of all development, possession, shipment, transfer, everything about biological weapons. Once that happened, it was possible to get the other nations to agree to do the same thing. And so that's why we have the 1972 Biological Weapons Convention. And the basic reason for it was, for any big power, it's just stupid even to develop biological weapons, because just think about it. Why would any big power want other countries to have a cheap weapon of mass destruction? What if hydrogen bombs cost 10 cents each? That certainly would not be to our advantage. It's to the advantage of big powers to keep weapons of mass destruction expensive. Now, nuclear weapons are very expensive, and so it's very lucky, and I would say in a way, that nuclear weapons are so difficult to make and so expensive. If it were the case that it's easy to make uranium-235 or the isotope of plutonium, we'd really be in the soup, because so many countries would have nuclear weapons. But fortunately, they're expensive and difficult to make.
Do you think there's ever a time in kind of our future history where biological weapons might make a resurgence? I think specifically we hear all the time about the possible use of a dirty bomb. Anthrax was a big scare around 2001 and shortly thereafter. Are we at a risk of seeing biological weapons being used by terrorists?
About terrorists, you may remember that How many years is it now? Nearly 15? We had the episode of the anthrax letters. So 5 people were killed. Anthrax spores were put in envelopes and mailed to various people, some in the press, and 5 people died of anthrax as a result. Now, the interesting thing is that was quite long ago, and there hasn't been a single copycat. So I think it's very interesting that so much time has passed without a single copycat, either here or elsewhere. So I take some encouragement from that. And I think it's understandable, too, because terrorists, millions and millions of people have been trained to use explosive weapons. More than millions of people know how to drive trucks. And an awful lot of people know how to fly airplanes. We've seen airplanes and trucks and explosive weapons used again and again by terrorists. And since there's so many people who know how to use those things, and so few who know how to do anything with biological weapons, just the arithmetic of the subject leads to some degree of optimism.
You've also talked in a lot of your career about just genetics in general. You recently wrote a paper detailing this idea that with the technology behind CRISPR, with the jumps in technology that we've made recently, we're taking evolution into our own hands. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Well, it's certain to happen. Not tomorrow, eventually. I mean, there's a big future ahead of us, we hope. Possibly tens of thousands of years. We now know about the case of the 2 little twin girls in China. Gene was removed from their genomes when they were embryos of only a few cells. Gene which, when removed, means that you can't get AIDS. There are recent evidence from mice that perhaps removal of that same gene from mice makes them more intelligent, more able to run mazes. So if it should turn out that these 2 little girls have been damaged badly by this genetic operation, then I think the world will recoil from modifying human heredity for a while. And if it turns out they have been enhanced, then that will accelerate the use of this somewhere by somebody. But sooner or later, modification of our genome, not just to remove harmful genes, but to enhance, and that of course means you have to define what you mean by enhancement. Different people will have different definitions, but once that gets going, it would be impossible to stop it. And I think it's sure to happen. We will take our own evolution into our own hands. When I say we, of course that means some subset of humans on this planet, and this will cause all kinds of problems.
So, yeah, should we?
I don't think it matters what you think. It's going to happen anyway.
Matthew Meselson, thank you so much for being here. You can check out his conversations this week at the Conference on World Affairs, along with many others on the Conference on World Affairs website. We'll make sure to put that in the description of this show.
Good. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Brainwaves. I'm Paul Bake. Dirk Martin produced this show. Andrew Sorensen is our executive producer. Andre Spelton created our introduction. Join us next week when we explore how gender is changing and how its definition is expanding around the world.